Re-Zero, Arc 7, Chapter 97, Arriving from Beyond the West.
The battle unfolding on the stage of the imperial capital Lupagana had been approaching the climax in every location. A dragon, clad in the very clouds themselves, swooped down to the sky where white snow was falling, and the bright red flames burned the sky into a turbulent cloud. The stone golems were colliding against the soldiers who wore desperate expressions, and with the strong arm of the beast clashing against the crafty old malice in front of the collapsed rampart, the war situation continued to seesaw back and forth. However, at this moment, at this very instant, the greatest focal point of this battlefield was within the innermost part of the imperial capital known as the Crystal Palace. It was the white light fired from the most beautiful castle in the world. The magic crystals used throughout the entire construction of the castle, even among magic stones, were purer crystallizations of mana, and while amplifying the stockpiled mana, the magic crystal cannon was a strategic weapon which could mow down its target. To be precise, it was the trump card of the Crystal Palace, and the artillery of the highest firepower within the possession of the Wallachian Empire. Even in this battlefield, it was the ultimate blow which could quite possibly decide the outcome of the battle with only a single shot. In the first place, only a limited number of people knew about the existence of this magic crystal cannon. It went without saying that Abel, who had the seat of emperor, and Zika Osman, who was told the outline of the operation, would be aware of it. In addition to Priscilla Bariel, for whom it was not strange to know this information beforehand, alongside a very limited number of personnel on the side of the rebel army, it would probably be generally the same on the imperial capital side. The fake Emperor Vincent Wallachia, who led the insurrection, and the Prime Minister Bastetz von Delphon, who remained there. Along with Moguro Hagane, who was the Crystal Palace itself. It was a secret weapon that even the other divine generals had not known about. And then, Abel. The power of the magic crystal cannon is limited to just 3 uses, but it will not be used more than once on this battlefield. That was Abel's judgment, and therefore, it was an awareness also shared with Vincent. For a variety of reasons, the magic crystal cannon was the trump card of national defense in every sense. The reckless act of using up all the remaining ammo was not something that could be done when thinking about the future. Of course, if Vincent intended to use it all on this battlefield without any consideration for the future, then that was another matter. Abel, you could not possibly engage in such desperate behavior. Abel did not especially think about what to call that conviction. However, conviction was conviction, and without discarding the budding of that, Abel had laid out the battlefield. So, he chose to give rise to a certainty that the magic crystal cannon, which could only be fired once, would fire an empty shot. That expectation had been brought out by the bundled decoys of Zika, a valuable asset for war potential, alongside the soldiers with high morale under his banner, and the other various tribes. Abel used the elite as decoys. The enemy cannot turn a blind eye. Then, having seen the unfortunate turn of events at the third bastion, the magic crystal cannon was directed to the battlefield protected by Moguro. The flaw of the magic crystal cannon was that it may cause tremendous damage even to allies, but on Moguro's battlefield, there was no need to worry about that. That was because the stone golems scattered across the battlefield, all of them that were parts of Moguro, and even the gigantic Moguro who had become one with the rampart, were not the main body. Therefore, the expectations of both sides overlapped, and the fired magic crystal cannon would wipe out one group of rebels. However, it would also eliminate the possibility for the rebels to be defeated with nothing they could do about it. Or so it should have been. Abel, that instant, a large number of people on the battlefield bore witness to a black light swallowing up the fired white light. Just what had brought that about? Where had the tremendous shot disappeared to without doing a sliver of damage? Was that an action belonging to friend or foe? Countless thoughts flew about in the burst emptiness, and everyone had been dumbfounded as they ceased their movements. At the rebel command post, Abel was no exception, and that had been an incident outside of his hypothesis. He, too, was captivated by the unexpected phenomenon, and a brief emptiness was yielded in his thoughts. What was different about him was that from there, he recovered faster than anyone else. Who, how, where, he did not know any of it, but, Abel, fire it up, just as planned. If one was met with a better situation than expected, there was nothing greater. In many cases, what was more necessary on the battlefield than a correct decision was a quick decision. Then, updating based on the events that had occurred due to that decision, it could be transformed into the correct decision. Removing his gaze from the battlefield that the white light should have mowed down, Abel gave the order. At that voice of Abel's, the stiff soldiers of the command post widened their eyes and lowered their gazes. To the several gazes which could not conceal their trembling, Abel responded with his own black eyes through his Oni mask. Abel, fire it up immediately. Give the order. Any delay will lead to the death of Zika Osman. Soldiers, HK, Abel, hurry, move. Soldiers, yes sir. The soldiers around and within the command center were all Zika's good subordinates. Originally, the plan had included Zika's life in the equation. It was hypocritical to refer to Zika's life, however, the soldiers accepted it and quickly began to move. Rather than Abel's decisiveness, it was Zika's accumulated trust that had allowed for this. Abel, you have fulfilled your duty as Suicide Corps. Nevertheless, do not slacken your hands, Zika Osman. If you have survived, it means that you still have a role to fulfill. In the distance, at the third bastion of the city walls that protected the imperial capital, a clash that should never have happened had occurred. A battle headed by Zika, with the people of Shudrak and other various tribes accompanying him. The battlefield had become a true contest of strengths to see who would be able to break past Mogoro and into the imperial capital. Watching the unforeseen hard-fought battle from afar, Abel touched his own Oni mask, and muttered, Abel, inevitably, the role I must play is also close at hand. Behind Abel as he muttered that, the soldiers had fired a magic stone cannon into the sky as they had been ordered. That was an indication of the situation's development, a retaliation against the side of the imperial capital, who had used up their trump card of the magic crystal cannon. It was a sign that the side of the rebel army had also played their own trump card. With that light stored in his eyes, Abel shifted his gaze to the opposite side from the third bastion. Abel, thou who seems to have entered the board from the west, who are you? Bastet's? Surely not. Bastet's von Dalfon's old throat quivered slightly as he gazed at the distant battlefield from the top level of the Crystal Palace. The usually unflappable imperial prime minister was so bewildered and upset that it took the guards at Bastet's side by surprise. Bastet's instantly tightened his cheeks when he felt the gazes of these soldiers from the side. Displaying any sort of indolence would make light of the empire. Even if those around him did not think so, as long as he himself believed so, he would not stand for it. That was the way of the Wallachian Empire. This was exactly how Bastet's himself envisioned the ideal Wallachia. Bastet's, naturally, if the imperial city were to be challenged, someone needs to figure out some sort of countermeasure, but, getting a hold of himself, Bastet's tackled the events that transpired head-on. What spilled from his lips was a reflection of the previous incident about the fact that the first blow of the magic crystal cannon, the trump card of the Crystal Palace, failed to hit its mark. The existence of the magic crystal cannon was considered to be top secret, known only to very few people in the empire. However, since they had to take on the real emperor, Vincent Wallachia, the secrecy of the magic crystal cannon's existence was completely meaningless. However, even if he knew of its existence, there was no way to thwart the magic crystal cannon's extraordinary firepower and value of its very existence in the first place. Therefore, Bastet surmised that Vincent would either avoid a decisive battle in the imperial capital or not deploy his army in a situation where the magic crystal cannon would be used. However, Vincent entered the battlefield. Moreover, he took command of the rebels who had gone ahead of him in the middle of the battle and began to manipulate the situation. Presumably, it was his last resort to push the expendable forces all the way into the line of fire of the magic crystal cannon. Seeking maximum efficiency, Bastet pointed the magic crystal cannon at the third bastion. Even if it was Vincent's plan to have them shoot at the part of the battlefield with the highest concentration of rebel troops to minimize the overall damage to his allies, the fact remained that the opponents would still suffer. To put down the sacrificial lambs and use the power of the 9 divine generals to crush the enemy's plans. With this in mind, he asked the other Vincent on the throne for forgiveness, and then, Vincent, once each side's chicanery is gone, only the sheer difference in troop strength remains. Do it. Being in agreement with Vincent, Bastet's ignited the magic crystal cannon. Once homed in on a target, the unleashed burst of enormous destructive power struck straight into the battlefield, vaporizing many heroes on its way, and should have sent them off into the distance. Therefore, with victory and defeat decided after the magic crystal cannon had mowed down the rebels, he already thought about the next steps after the battle situation had been redefined. However, Bastet's, the damage done by the magic crystal cannon is non-existent, considering the track record of the restored magic crystal cannon sealed in the Crystal Palace. It did not occur to him that Vincent might have some means of offsetting it. It was undoubtedly Vincent's way to keep his cards in play until the last possible moment. Bastet lamented over the fact he had been completely outwitted, but at the same time, he felt a rush of excitement in his heart. More than anything else, he thought, what a shame it was. Bastet, Your Excellency, I am regretful from the bottom of my heart, since it was the way of the Wallachian Empire to revere the strong. Vincent's approach to rule the empire with wits rather than violence as the one at its pinnacle was a combination of boredom and horror. To possess the political skills to avoid any major war was something that he himself admired and esteemed at the same time. Still, he had no complaints about serving Vincent, as long as he would fulfill his duties as emperor and protect the glory of the Wallachian Empire. Bastet, what would you do upon your return, Your Excellency? What would he do with the empire after his return to the throne and the execution of all the people that rebelled against him? Would he leave the empire as it was before, and once again relinquish his duties as emperor? Even the most outstanding emperor had no right to remain on the throne if he was content with letting that happen. Bastet, prepare the magic crystal cannon for the next shot. Since the number of charges for the magic crystal cannon was fixed, they were not allowed to run out now. Nevertheless, if the situation needed to be changed, Bastet would use all his authority. However, if the opponent had 2 trump cards to counteract the magic crystal cannon, he could not make the same mistake again. Until he figured that out, he could not see it through. Soldier, Prime Minister Bastet. Look at that. Suddenly, one of the soldiers standing by Bastet raised his voice. Following the soldier's gaze, one could see the light of the magic stones emanating in the sky far behind the battlefield, probably at the point where the main camp of the rebels would have been laid out. It was some kind of signal. It was terribly unreliable as the sky above the battlefield was dyed white and red, but it would be effective enough for anyone waiting for the signal to come. Bastet, a signal. Behind his narrowed eyes, Bastet surmised his opponent's intentions. After the magic cannon had fired, they thought the situation should have changed as well. If so, was that signal an instruction to the soldiers on the front line? However, if the intention was to inform the soldiers fighting on the front lines, that signal was way too unreliable. Therefore, it was not for informing the soldiers on the front lines. Bastet, reinforcements. Meanwhile, Bastet contemplated, with the majority of the rampaging rebels who gathered from all over the country on the battlefield already crushed by the power of the 9 divine generals, what kind of forces could function as reinforcements? Reinforcements are not pieces one simply withholds. They should be a trump card in the proper sense, deployed to decisively change the war situation. Of course, they are meaningless unless they pack a sufficient punch. Just what kind of forces could they possibly be? With those thoughts, Bastet widened his slit-like eyes and turned them to the distant west. Bastet, it cannot be. Slowly reflected in the vision of the meticulously muttering Bastet were the shadows arriving from the western sky, unfolding across on a large scale, were the calmly approaching supreme rulers of the sky, a flock of flying dragons. Many of them resided in the Wallachian Empire. However, the treasured techniques and masterful skills required to tame a flying dragon, uniting the most of those wings under their banner, was the great noble who possessed preeminent power within the empire. In this decisive battle of the imperial capital, the High Countess, who had refused to participate on the grounds of maintaining order within her own territory, and the one in command of the empire's strongest flying dragon squadron. Bastet, High Countess Serena Drakroy, is it? The flying dragon squadron approaching from beyond the sky, spotting a dragon ship sporting flaming red sails among them. Bastet understood the threat of the reinforcements that the rebels had prepared. In terms of controlling flying dragons, his camp also had one of the 9 divine generals, Madeleine Ischart. In front of said dragonkin, all flying dragons were slaves to her will. However, the only exceptions were the flying dragons that had forged bonds with a tamer through the technique of flying dragon taming. Bastet's, even so, it would merely be a struggle for air supremacy. No, if she has summoned the cloud dragon, then that presumption must also change. Despite the shock of the magic crystal cannon being negated, Bastet's had not neglected his grasp of the battlefield. During the fierce battles that had unfolded at the 5 bastions, even the colors of the heavens and the earth experienced erratic changes due to the various battlefields, and in one of those battles the descent of a mighty dragon was spotted. As a dragonkin, Madeline was able to summon the dragon which was connected to her ancestors. Up until now, she had never called the cloud dragon Mazoya to the ground. That call of hers, it would drastically change the flow of the battle. Of course, the circumstances under which Madeline would summon Mazoya were impossible to intuit, meaning it was possible that simply driving her into a corner could suffice. Bastet's, be that as it may, in case of flying dragons fighting each other for air supremacy, in both quantity and quality, Bastet's believed that they held the advantage. The determined decision of High Countess Serena Dracroy to side with the rebels must have been a rage-inducing mistake for the men of Wallachia. Yet, Bastet's, thinking this, Bastet's was staring towards the western sky as he realized something. He was completely fixated on the slowly approaching flying dragon squadron, but that was not the only change that had occurred in the west. On the western hills, a closer look revealed the shape of a newly developing group. For a moment, they appeared to be the forces of High Countess Dracroy, but Bastet's quickly changed his mind as it became evident that this was not the case. The reason for that was simple: the flag that group was hosting. It was neither the crest of High Countess Dracroy, a flying dragon with a scar on its cheek, nor the imperial crest of the Wallachian Empire, a sword piercing a wolf, but an entirely different flag. Slightly troubled by what was portrayed on it, Bastet said, "Bastet's, is that a star? ? Hey, bro, what are you doing? We're already completely late? ? Stop with the fussin', lizard bastard. Schwartz is in the middle of something. ? Sure, he's in the middle of something, but Hyan has a point. What are we going to do? Should we join the ranks of the rebel army like this? ? Wow, do you see that, boss? The right and left are all over the place. It is truly a great decisive battle. Where should we go? I can't stop my chest from throbbing. Subaru, ooh, shut up. Can't you see, I'm in a very moving scene right now?" As a group of familiar voices jumped at him, making a huge ruckus, Natsuki Subaru rebuked them as he was reminded how dangerously accustomed he had become to being Natsuki Schwartz these days. Although Natsuki Schwartz was ultimately just an alias, he felt strongly about his real name being Natsuki Subaru when he was called. Rather, Subaru, I'm pretty sure you are aware that you're calling my name, right? Louis, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Subaru, I get it. I get it already, so don't spill your snot all over me. Drop it, Subaru responded as he strongly pushed away the face of the blonde-haired girl clinging to him, Louis, as she drenched him in her tears and snot. However, he could not shake Louis off resolutely since he was also greatly indebted to her for her valuable contributions. Subaru had already asked too many things of Louis he could not make amends for, although he could exculpate himself for having no other recourse. Subaru, if I do that, I don't deserve to face you. So I'll do it right, Louis, you. Louis groaned as she rested her forehead while clinging on to Subaru's back. Whether that was her way of forgiving him, or whether she was just happy to be reunited, Subaru sighed as he accepted that she did not seem to harbor any negative feelings. He not only had to apologize to Louis, but he also owed her many thanks, but the one he was most thankful for, Subaru, Beatrice. Tightly, he hugged her and called her name, stroking her ample hair. The one true reason why this girl, with such a sheer volume of curly hair and a gorgeous dress, took the entire expedition to this unfitting battlefield upon herself was, without a doubt, Subaru. She must have done something incredibly reckless for her to almost disappear like that. That was why? Beatrice, Subaru. As those lips uttered his name, Subaru breathed a sigh of relief. His name was truly Natsuki Subaru, once again. ? Excuse me, Schwartz-sama? Subaru, Feeling relieved, Subaru's shoulders jumped when he heard an unexpected whisper close to his ear. As he reflexively turned around, there was a familiarly lovely-faced Tanza, the kimono-wearing dear girl, with her usual expressionless face, stared at Subaru, who sat on his butt holding Beatrice in his arms while Louis clung to his back. Tanza, I apologize for interrupting your amusement. But Hyan and the others are correct. We don't have enough time to spare for leisure activities. Subaru, leisure activities? Isn't that a bit harsh? Tanza, we don't have enough time to spare for leisure activities. Subaru, sorry, my bad. I understand your feelings, Tanza. Probably, Yorna-san is also somewhere on this battlefield. Rushed by a cold and tough voice, Subaru admitted his wrongdoing and showed such understanding. Thereupon, Tanza slightly lowered her round eyebrows and then muttered yes. Tanza, who had ended up accompanying Subaru following a series of events, was a girl who had originally been a servant to Yorna Mishigya, the ruler of the demon city of Chaos Flame. While suppressing her desire to meet up with Yorna as soon as possible, Tanza had accompanied Subaru on his journey, and finally their reunion was close at hand. Being in such a restless state of mind, it was fairly understandable of her to feel the urge to interrupt Subaru, who was getting a head start on his own joyful reunion. However, Beatrice, Subaru, what is the deal with this impertinent dear girl? In Subaru's arms, the writhing Beatrice looked up at Tanza, declaring this in a somewhat dissatisfied voice. Tanza promptly gazed at Beatrice. Tanza, my name is Tanza. Due to a series of events, I have been serving as Schwartz Summer's attendant. Beatrice, humph, I understand, in fact. Thank you for your hard work, I suppose. From now on Betty and the others will take care of Subaru, so you can consider yourself dismissed. In fact, Tanza, you will take care of him. In that state? It appears like you cannot even move properly without Schwartz Summer holding you in his arms. Beatrice, Subaru is holding on to Betty for the sake of his life, that is good enough, I suppose. Subaru, wait, why are we fighting? As fellow little girls, shouldn't you get along? Somehow Subaru got caught up in a perilous outburst of auras between the two girls, and his voice involuntarily cracked. For the typically composed Tanza, this attitude was both unbefitting and unendearing, but in a good way. Not that Subaru was unaware that you should not tell a young girl how immature she was. Subaru, Tanza, Beatrice, don't fight, you two. You're allies, both of you. Come on, Tanza. Beatrice Summer was poking her nose first. Also, Yorna Summer told me to respond in kind to contemptible people who act heedlessly. Subaru, she really told such a code of Hammurabi type of thing? I didn't know that. Then, you should be sorry. Beatrice, Subaru tried to mediate between them as Beatrice's round eyes stared at him motionlessly. Getting caught up in the characteristic pattern of her pupils, Subaru twisted his neck and asked what's wrong. Then, Beatrice's trembling and quivering lips. Beatrice, just now, you called that girl's name before Betty's. What were you thinking, I suppose? Subaru, eh? Did I? Beatrice, you did. How utterly infuriating, I suppose. I will not stand for this no matter what. In fact, her eyes flaring up in anger, Beatrice grabbed his collar and shook her head back and forth. Upon hearing this unexpected ruling, Subaru also became dizzy, and then, getting fed up with this back and forth going absolutely nowhere, ? Schwartz, even I, as the official, have limits to my patience. You should be aware of this, correct? Beatrice, Maya, Subaru, oh. As this deep, heavy voice passed, Beatrice screamed even before Subaru. Following Beatrice's baffled gaze, Subaru understood her surprise. Standing there, in a black overcoat with 4 folded arms, was a stern-faced Gustav Morello looking down at them. Being the governor of the Gladiator Island, he should normally have captured Subaru and his men who were now brazenly traveling outside of the island, but now he was a collaborator, no, a comrade. This was not limited to just him. At this very spot were not only the large number of people accompanying Subaru from the Gladiator Island, but also his companions who had assembled together with everyone as comrades. Beatrice, Subaru, this man. Subaru, that's Gustav-san. He looks scary, but at his core he's frighteningly diligent. Gustav-san, the one on my back is Louis, and this girl is Beatrice. She's my, Gustav, your, Subaru, I mean, you know, that. Patting the back of Beatrice, who was curling up, Subaru was at a loss for words, coming up with an explanation for Gustav. Witnessing that, Gustav, Tanza and Beatrice were all frowning at the numerous stares directed towards him. Subaru awkwardly scratched his head and, Subaru, I'll fill you in on the details later. Gustav, hey, Beatrice, wait, I suppose. Subaru, could it be that not only your appearance, but also your mind has been slightly? While Gustav earnestly accepted Subaru's overly sloppy misdirection, Beatrice was about to hit the nail too straight on head, so Subaru covered her mouth. Then, he heard a soft rattling of Beatrice. Subaru, it's complicated when I have to explain to people about my shrinking. So I'm going to keep it to myself for now. Beatrice, you do remember Betty properly. In fact, Subaru, I love you so much, and that's why I have to do this. At the suspicious look in Beatrice's eyes, Subaru replied and then squeezed her hand, Beatrice's small hand intertwining with his. As soon as he did so, Subaru was momentarily struck by a dizzying sense of emptiness. But it did not last forever, just the first larger beat. Subaru, I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for you. Right? Beatrice, you were trying to change the subject well enough, I suppose. Besides, Subaru, besides, Beatrice. Subaru, something is off. In fact, warmth flowed from within Subaru to Beatrice as they held each other's hands in front of one another. Subaru was aware that this was not a bad thing, but rather a reassurance. His memory of Beatrice was a bit hazy, with only some details being blurry, and so he was somewhat optimistic he would be fine once his body was returned to normal. In any case, while Subaru took such a positive view of the situation, Beatrice furrowed her shapely brow and appeared to be pondering something. Subaru, as adorable as your thinking expression is, what exactly feels off? Beatrice, while separated from Betty, Subaru had no method of expelling mana, I suppose. So it was natural for mana to pile up, but this amount is, Subaru, dash? Beatrice's long eyelashes trembled as she tightened her fingers as if to confirm. Her lips spilled a muttering voice in front of Subaru, who was tilting his head. She had certainly muttered this. That it was too much, but before the truth of the situation could be ascertained, Hyan, bro, bad news. That Cecilus guy got ahead of himself. Subaru, wah? Hyan's shrill voice rose like a scream, and Subaru hurriedly turned his head to look as he pointed to a battlefield where fierce relentless clashes continued, and a cloud of dust continued to rage in that direction. It was evidence of an impatient, unruly boy who was rushing down the hillside. Whites, what now? Should I bring him back or? Subaru, no, as much as I appreciate your thought, but that would be too much for you, Whites. To begin with, it's impossible for anyone to stop Ceci. But with a flag, Whites, got you, Schwartz. While harboring annoyed thoughts at the distant cloud of dust, Subaru considered the bright side of this rampage, since he knew full well from his journey so far that he was unable to hold the reins. Having regained his composure, Subaru made his next request, and it was Idra who moved keenly. He and White slowly raised the flag in its place, and this action was followed by a large number of their comrades in arms around them. Flag after flag was raised, and it would have appeared to those around them that the group on this hillside was firmly united. Subaru, Louis, could you get off my back? Louis, Subaru, I'm not going to disappear out of the blue again, I assure you. I've made peace with what caused me to get whisked away. Subaru persuaded Louis, who was still traumatized by his disappearance and reluctant to leave Subaru's back. Louis was still skeptical, but willingly left Subaru's back after all. Still, her reluctance was evident of a certain lack of trust. Beatrice. Betty has no intention of ever leaving. In fact, Subaru, yeah, you stay with me. Tanza, is everything ready? Tanza, yes. The Pleiades battalion is ready to go at any time. Behind the bowing Tanza, Subaru smiled as he watched his comrades raise their flags, their weapons, and their fighting spirits. With high morale and brimming with motivation, the objective was in sight. All that was left was to seize it. Subaru, since Ceci probably knows my plan without me telling him each and every detail, that's just his usual amusement. Well, let's get started, everyone. Everyone? Yeah. Beatrice, HK. There was a tremendous response to Subaru's call, as Beatrice's breath got caught in her throat. If one were to hear it for the first time, this would come as a guaranteed surprise. However, Subaru's ears had already grown accustomed to it, and it was a very important pre-fight ritual. Louis, wow, Beatrice, Subaru, just what do you intend on doing, I suppose? Louis and Beatrice, who had just joined Subaru, looked up at him, not knowing the details of the situation. Subaru closed one eye to meet their gaze and took a step forward with excitement welling up from deep within his body, which he firmly contained in his slender legs. And then, he declared, Subaru, isn't it obvious? We're gonna ruin this stupid war that my shitty father started.